Welcome to another edition of Dan Frequently Asked Questions. In this edition, we have a question by a diver about a fractured wrist that has been mended by a splint. They describe specifically that the doctor applied a waterproof or fiberglass cast, and they want to know whether they can go on a dive trip. Now, the straight off the bat, shot from the hip answer would be, it's not a good idea, but it would depend on a number of things. One, it would depend on what is meant by wrist, because wrist can be anything from the bones in the hand, which are the bones over here, the thin bones over there, and sometimes even the lower parts of the radius and ulna. Depending on which parts of the wrist are actually fractured, that may have a significant effect on diving. And if it affects the scaphoid bone, which essentially lies in this area, or a fracture and or dislocation of the lunar bone, carpal bone, then the individual should first heal. And we would recommend the typical 6 weeks, no diving, no activity, before they consider return to diving and confirm that healing has occurred, because some wrist injuries do not heal that rapidly, if at all. For instance, scaphoid fractures may actually persist. On a practical level though, if the wrist is immobilized in a way that it does not affect the person's ability to dive safely, in other words, they can still manage all their dive equipment, etc., there could be a case made for diving with the arm in, for instance, a plastic bag to keep the cast fairly waterproof. Now, you mentioned that the cast is waterproof, but it is still not a good idea to have water enter a waterproof cast, because under the waterproof cast there is a layer of cotton wool, and if that is saturated with water, it may ultimately not only cause skin maceration, but it can cause fungal infections and other irritations of the skin. So the bottom line is, first of all, if you can, don't dive. If it's a type of injury that should first be confirmed as healed, don't dive. If you can dive with that particular splint waterproofed without interfering with any of the diving, including emergency procedures, you might consider diving, but you certainly wouldn't want to expose the cast to water per se because of the cotton wool that is against the skin. I hope that's answered your question, and until next time, and hopefully after you've healed, enjoy safe diving.